Over 200 experts have shared their secrets to a successful business. Join me, Rose Davidson, as I discover how these experts took their businesses to the next level.
Talking with the experts.
Welcome to Talking with the Experts. Talking about all things business by business owners for business owners. Episode 236, Adam Stanecki.
The first thing is to understand what's really important for you. Like, who do you want to be as a person, rather than trying to fit in and wear a mask, or maybe be the chameleon that just navigates the groups and says the right things at the right time, again, potentially to the detriment of yourself. I talk to men most often sort of in their 40s who have done all of the things they're supposed to do. They've found a partner. If they're heterosexual, they've probably started a family, and they've got the job and they've got the qualifications and they've got the house and the car and maybe the jet ski, but they still feel like they're not living on purpose. Like, they've ticked all of these boxes. And so with those men, I often talk about authenticity, and you're like, what's your purpose? What do you actually really want to do with your life? I think if we had the opportunity maybe to do that earlier, and maybe this is a schooling thing, which would be a longer discussion, but we can tap into that and we could each live what's true for ourselves.
Talking with the experts.
Hello and welcome to Talking with the Experts. Talking with the Experts is about all things business by business owners for business owners, and you can find it on all good podcasting streaming platforms and on YouTube. My name's Rose Davidson. I'm your host today, and I'm from rosedavidson.com. And today my guest is Adam Stanecki, and here's my second Australian interview for today, so I'm really happy about that. And Adam's from Wholeheartedly Healing, and we're going to be talking about living a wholehearted life. So Adam is a healer, a men's coach with experience spanning many fields, including traditional Chinese medicine, fitness, hypnosis, NLP, acceptance and commitment therapy, and martial arts, and the list goes on and on. Adam helps people get unstuck so that they can live their lives wholeheartedly. Thanks for joining me today, Adam, and welcome.
Thank you, Rose. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about, we in life and in business, we experience, the fullness of life, and sometimes we contribute easier to the outcomes of others at the expense of ourselves. How can we flip that around?
Well, that's a really great question. I think this comes down to language sometimes, because we're taught to be nice when we're children. And I feel like nice is making other people feel good to the potential detriment of ourselves. Whereas if we change that word slightly to kind or kindness, we can be really honest and be kind and not diminish ourselves, and still potentially make other people feel better, but more realistically, we're authentic and we're true. So instead of giving our power away to other people, trying to make them feel good, we can level the playing field a little bit. And so we connect at a more true position where we can come together. And I've seen that when I come from a corporate background before I moved into healing and coaching. And I saw it all the time where people were wearing masks and trying to please other people to get ahead. And the dynamic suffered.
Yeah, it's always interesting to watch other people and the dynamics in groups in the corporate space, and even outside the corporate space, but specifically more in the corporate space where there's so many different personalities, and they're all trying to vie for the attention of the boss, and how they go interacting with everyone. It's quite funny sometimes to watch. They're like small children.
It does. It looks like the playground at school sometimes, doesn't it? Where there's this almost political element, but a childlike political element where there's a little bit of sniping, and there's a little bit of poking, and there's the shaming and the guilting and the one-upmanship and all of that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. I notice it more with women though than men, but I'm sure men go through the same sorts of behaviors, I guess maybe because they keep it more hidden than women do. Women are more open about those things.
I think you could be right. And then there's also the popular opinion that that's the way things are. So we pick up on it a little bit more.
Yeah, it could be. It could be. I have a very good friend who keeps telling me that my language needs changing. It's always so negative, and please use more positive words. But that's just the person I am, and changing the language. You've got to get the rubber band all the time, and I keep forgetting to flick on it.
It takes practice. It really does. Language is, it's the best way that we've got to communicate, but it's not necessarily the best way to communicate.
No, that's very true. But it's so true. I can't dispute that at all. So tell me a little bit about more that how can we all live our truth and use it in that way to better connect with co-workers?
Well, I think the first thing is to understand what's really important for you. Like, who do you want to be as a person, rather than trying to fit in and wear a mask, or maybe be the chameleon that just navigates the groups and says the right things at the right time. Again, potentially to the detriment of yourself. I talk to men most often sort of in their 40s who have done all of the things they're supposed to do. They've found a partner. If they're heterosexual, they've probably started a family, and they've got the job, and they've got the qualifications, and they've got the house and the car and maybe the jet ski, but they still feel like they're not living on purpose. Like they've ticked all of these boxes. And so with those men, I often talk about authenticity, and you're like, what's your purpose? What do you actually really want to do with your life? I think if we had the opportunity maybe to do that earlier, and maybe this is a schooling thing, which would be a longer discussion, but we could tap into that and we could each live what's true for ourselves, then even the corporate world would still succeed. We can get out of this pattern that we found from the Industrial Revolution, where we're all working in factories and we had to do our little bit. But we don't have to all work like that anymore. And so I think there are great opportunities to do what you want to do, be what you want to be. Now, of course, there are limitations within organizations. So maybe that allows for more creativity and entrepreneurship and all of these types of things. But I still think there's a place for it in organizations as well. Being true to yourself, you don't have to be an egotistical maniac, but that truth and that honesty, I think there's a place for that. And we miss it in organizations with all of the political footballs and all of that kind of stuff that's going on and shifting goalposts. There's an opportunity there.
Yeah, when I was working in the corporate world, I always felt like a square peg in a round hole. I just didn't feel like I fit in anywhere, because I was just considered to be too out there, for the general populace. And I thought, oh, well, okay, is that a good thing or a bad thing? And I used to question myself all the time, why can't I be more like them? Why couldn't I be more feminine? One of my male co-workers said, you need to be more female, Rose. I said, what does that mean? I didn't even know what that meant.
I'm not quite sure I know what that means either.
Okay, and he explained to me that I needed to wear makeup to work, and I needed to dress a certain way, even though we were all in uniform. I obviously wasn't wearing my uniform in a feminine way, so right. I don't know what that meant, but yeah, but I always felt out of place. And so what happens to those people who feel out of place because they are being true to themselves, and they are that round peg in a square hole?
Well, your story might be similar to most people. They end up moving out of the corporate space and doing something maybe that's cooperative. Maybe they find a shared space, like a shared office to work in, and they collaborate with people there, or they start their own thing. One thing that I find that's really ironic is organizations tell us that they value people that fit in and can work in teams and just slot in, square pegs for square holes. But then everyone admires people like Richard Branson and Elon Musk, who are completely out there doing their own thing, being creative. And yet they don't want that person in the organization because they'd make too many ripples, and they'd probably be tsunamis, let's be honest.
Yes, yeah. I used to temp a lot, and I can see where processes or procedures could be changed so that they were less onerous, and you needed less steps to achieve the same outcome. And I quite often used to go and say, well, if you did it this way, but my language obviously wasn't conducive to the corporate space because I didn't work for them for very long.
And I think that happens all the time. That it's a self-fulfilling prophecy within organizations that if you don't fit in, the machine spits you out. And so I can remember in uni studying management with my IT degree, and we were talking about organizational change then, as if we had to really, really manage it. And it just goes to show you, so that's more than 20 years ago. It goes to show you that we still haven't worked it out, that this change within organizations is very difficult because the status quo is important enough, and the profitability is enough, and people's roles and responsibilities and remuneration is enough, that there is no real reason for them to actually change in the way we might talk about, to allow for creativity and to allow for personal growth. But you hear all of this stuff a lot in HR departments and TED Talks and things like that, that we want to allow people to grow and be mindful. And then these same people that are being encouraged don't necessarily fit the mold anymore.
No, they get shoved out. You and I must live in it must be about the same age then, because when I did my HR management studies at uni, the change management thing that we had to do, it didn't fit with me. I didn't agree with any of it. I thought it was
so strange,
bloody horrible.
And I can remember studying TQM, total quality management.
Yeah.
And I sat there for a semester saying, but why would you do it any other way? And so the professor was kind of put out with my complete lack of understanding. But I just said, why wouldn't you do the best work you could with the best processes that you've got available now to produce the best results? But apparently we had to study all of this
rubbish.
But isn't that obvious? And I think that I have the same feeling. It sounds to me, Rose, that you have the same feeling, that isn't this change stuff obvious? Well, clearly not at an organizational level. But I do want to say that there are positive opportunities in this. Just because there are some organizations that are still stuck in the status quo doesn't mean that there aren't newer organizations that are popping up. And I mean, I think I mentioned Google a moment ago, but you can look at Google and Apple. Yeah, they're very big organizations, but they started with a different ethos.
Yeah.
It was about going out and breaking things, failing forward, and then go from there, pick up the pieces if you break it, ask for forgiveness later.
Yeah,
way different to what I grew up with when I was in an organization.
Oh, you may both. Yeah, no, we just had to, follow what we were told to do. And you grow up with that mentality, just do what you're told and don't make waves, don't upset the status quo, honestly.
No ripples.
No ripples.
And it goes back to, it's almost the same as children should be seen but not heard. And then that goes on into adulthood. Employees, just do what you do. Don't actually say anything more than that. We don't need.
Oh, but they encourage you. They do encourage you to have a say, but no one listens to it anyway. So why bother?
And I know this discussion has got this negative twinge to it. It's just pointing to the things that can be improved. I think that's important to note. That at some point, most organizations are going to work this stuff out. And maybe it's generational change that will see this happen.
Yeah, you're right. It was getting a little bit negative, but the positive spin on it is that there are organizations who are trying to change the outdated mode of managing and leading their teams. And, kudos to them for, taking off the rose-coloured glasses and seeing things for how they are and treating their staff accordingly. And people do have brains, and they should have a say.
They've got brains and hearts. And the thing is, the smaller organisations that I interact with, they seem to be doing it really well. I went to a men's retreat that was a 3-day deep dive. I mean, it was heavy work for a lot of the men that turned up, and there was one man who had brought along his staff, and it was a small team, but he brought 3 or 4 other men along. So they had this experience together that was more than your normal organizational team building. They did men's work together. And you know that because they'd gone through that they're going to get to work, and that environment at work is going to be so much stronger. So these are great opportunities. The smaller organizations jump into this stuff. They don't have to do the corporate event type stuff that's tens of thousands of dollars a day and it's some kind of team building exercise in the middle of wherever. There's these great little opportunities just to get away and connect. It doesn't have to be team building.
Yeah. I think connection is the way to go. And I think a few more businesses, as long as they got to understand that connecting with the coalface is much more beneficial to your business than not.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So tell me a little bit more about how you help your clients go through this process of, learning how to connect with each other.
Well, it starts with connecting with yourself. And so that's the lovely part. Everyone can do that. It's not something that you need an organization or you need a small business or you need to be an entrepreneur to manage. First, you've got to work out what your own stuff is. And much as we're taught certain ways to interact when we're at work, we're also taught certain ways to think. We're taught to problem solve, and we're always taught at school how important the intellect is, almost to the point where we push down the intuition because heart intelligence and following your gut, that's not real thinking. That's all pretend thinking. You need to use your brain all of the time. But getting into that place where you don't have to be stuck overthinking and overwhelmed, and you can calm that thinking mind down a little bit and go with your intuition a little bit more, creates you space. Then when you've got that space, you can work out, who am I as a person? Who do I want to connect with? Who are those people? Where are they? And then you can connect, and you're not connecting up here, working out what you need to get from this person, what you need to give them. And it doesn't become this zero-sum game where it's competition. It's actually connection. But it starts with self. Like if you don't know your own stuff, you really have to pretend the whole time. So you go to work and you're pretending who you are. How do you connect? You go home and you sit on the couch and you're like, well, that was another heavy day where I pretended to be someone else. And now I'm really exhausted and I don't feel fulfilled.
Yeah, the trouble, I think, again, it goes back to our upbringing where we are taught to wear this mask depending on who we're with. So, you wear one with your family and you wear one with your friends and don't have the same face when you're with either of them because, you could get into trouble. So, yeah, it's a difficult thing. But I do think, though, that parenting now has got a lot better in the fact that they allow children to be who they are, no matter who they're with. Yes.
Yeah, and that seen but not heard thing is not a big thing anymore. And I see it. My children, my son's just going into high school, my daughter's just finishing primary school. And whilst they're in an independent school, even in the state schools around this area, I don't see as much of this trying to fit people into the mold, young people into the mold, so then they can go and do the work that needs to be done. There is an acceptance of everyone being slightly different and having different interests. And let's maybe investigate that more. You see that from teachers. There's less pressure coming down on the teachers, so the teachers have the opportunity to allow children to explore what's interesting to them.
Yeah, I agree. And I really like those schools where there is no set curriculum. As long as the child gets through the school year and passes, but they're not made to learn a set curriculum. So you haven't got this, maths curriculum that you have to learn at a certain level. And I really applaud those schools. When my kids were young, I thought they were a bit silly, but, as I've grown up, I see those types of schools in a different light because I think that they give children much more opportunity to be themselves and explore the things. So if they don't like doing maths, well, why force someone to do that particular subject if it doesn't suit them? I mean, exactly. Have you ever used Pythagoras' theorem for whatever it's called for anything?
No, other than to explain it. But see, I'm not in engineering. I don't need any of that kind of stuff.
Right.
It's interesting material. And the thing is, we can just ask a search engine now for the answer to that thing.
Absolutely. Why do we need to learn it now? And I think it's ridiculous Never mind, I won't go into that now because I don't have the time for the place.
A base level of knowledge is important, but then to think that every person that comes through that system needs to know exactly the same amount to the same degree. Think of, I wonder what Picasso studied at school. I don't think it really, it wasn't maths and science maybe. And he was a genius in his chosen field.
Absolutely.
That's what we need to investigate. Where is everyone's genius? Because I honestly believe that everyone has genius and it's just a matter of finding it.
Yeah, well, I found mine in the last 2 years. I didn't know what my genius was, but I've finally found it. I'm good at it. So why not just make the best use of it? And, all the stuff that I learned before doesn't really matter. It was just a have to thing. So
how much more comfortable are you now that you've found your genius and you're living on purpose there? So
much more. I don't stress about anything hardly anymore now. So
exactly right.
Except where the next chocolate's coming from.
Well, and that's always the question here as well.
Yeah, love my chocolate. Anyway, Adam, tell me, have you written a book? Have you done anything exciting like that?
Oh, geez, I'd love to write a book. I reckon I've sat down 4 or 5 times with an idea and gotten through the first couple of chapters, and then my brain's taken me on another path. But I think that my book will be called Wholehearted or something similar to that. And it will speak to, when I finally get there, it will speak to this process of understanding yourself and introducing stuff that's not just theory, but practice. So you can actually pick the book up and go through some processes, whether they're breathing exercises or meditations, or go and do something, or write yourself a list, or whatever it may be, just to help people tap into what it really is to be alive, not going through every day wondering when you're going to start living.
Yeah, what a great idea for a book. That'd be a bestseller.
Well, I don't know. I might need to know a few people who know a few people to get it on the shelves, but it's here.
Yeah,
it's a matter of getting it out in a concise fashion.
Talk it. Get text to talk to text and do it that way.
Yeah. So my process at the moment is very much about stripping away, because I have so many ideas. So when I'm working with my clients, if it's in a healing session, which is more about holding space and sort of, I call it therapy without it being therapy. So it's therapy for people who don't want to go and see a therapist.
Yeah.
And I've got that skill set, but I apply it in a very gentle fashion. And what I'm learning is the less I say and the less I do in those sessions, the better the outcomes. So if I'm going to write a book, how can I present that in a nice, concise fashion that isn't dictating what to do and just saying this is the only way? So as I strip that back, then maybe I get to the point where I get past chapter 2 in the next iteration of writing.
A friend of mine actually is a video coach. So she teaches women how to use video to better themselves, better their business.
Uh-huh.
And she's actually written a written book, but in the book there are videos in it where she explains, and she's putting it up on Amazon next year. It's quite an interesting concept where you buy a digital book, but it's got videos in it explaining processes and all sorts of things. And I can't wait to see it when it comes out.
That sounds perfect.
Yeah, that's perfect.
A great way of using genius, right? I do video. I'm going to put video in the text. That's perfect.
That's it. Exactly right. Or maybe get a podcast.
I've got a podcast going. I deliver content online. I've got programs. So all of the content's there, but putting it in a book is a different beast entirely.
Certainly is. Yes, I've tried a few times to write mine, and I've got all the things written out, but I keep saying it's too long, then it's too short, and then so.
It's definitely on my list, and I will do it one day. And I'm not putting it off. It's just not the right time for me. But
no, it's not for me either. Adam, where can people find you if they want to work with you?
Online, everywhere. First name, last name. So it's Adam Stanecki, is Stanecki. If you search Google, I'll come up. There might be another Adam Stanecki somewhere in Poland, but I don't think he's on Facebook or any social media. So you'll find me and adamstanecki.com. Go straight to my website. And I always say to anyone, if you're interested, just get in touch, leave me a message, send me an email, let's have a chat. And if something comes from there, awesome. If not, that's awesome as well, because it's all about making the connections.
Absolutely. I totally agree with connecting with people. That's why I love doing this podcast. I think you're about my 237th person I've interviewed, and I think I've made such great connections out of the people that I've met. So yeah, it's that's why I love doing it, because I quite often learn something as well as connect with nice people. So yeah.
Yeah, and this is great. Like, I've got a new connection out of this as well. So I love that, Rose. It's wonderful. It's such a good way of connecting with people you might not otherwise connect with.
Absolutely. And, the world needs more connecting and less of the other stuff.
Through that.
All right. Any last words of wisdom, Adam, before we finish up today?
I got asked on this retreat. We had 3 young men, 13 and 14, come along, and all of the older men there, who were around about my age, were asked to give the young men some advice. And I just said, believe in yourself. No matter what anyone tells you about you, believe in yourself. And that's kind of what I'm sharing with everyone at the moment, that if you believe in yourself, you can work it out.
Absolutely. Yeah. So sometimes it's the believing in oneself that can take you to places that you've never been.
True that. Absolutely.
All right, Adam, thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolute joy.
Thank you, Rose. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining me on Talking with the Experts. Make sure you subscribe through your favourite podcast app or on YouTube, and check out my Patreon page for more value for you, or you can buy me a coffee. My name's Rose Davidson from rosedavidson.com. I look forward to your company next time when I'm talking with the experts.